I wasn't an old timer when I came in here, but I am now. You know, that's a whole nother subject. Can you all hear me? This thing working?
Yeah.
How about now?
Yeah, I don't think it's on.
Okay.
It's on.
My name's Bill Shade, and I am an alcoholic.
Hey, Bill.
I'm very grateful to be here or anywhere. And I'm going to try and share a little bit of strength, a little bit of hope, and a little bit of experience this evening. You know, I have been doing this for a while, and the thing that sticks in my mind is there's always three stories. There's the one I plan on taking to you when I come down here. There's the one that I actually tell you about, and then there's the one that on the way home I go, shit, I wish I told him that. Oh man, I left out that part. Oh, that was really cool. And you know, I'm going to use some different words this evening, and some of them I hope are not offensive. I'm going to use creator. I'm going to use a higher power. I may even use the word God. And I'm going to use the word grace, because I have a special relationship with a higher power, and I choose to call my higher power grace. Louder?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. How about now?
What?
Microphone?
I don't think it's on.
It doesn't sound like it's on. You gotta speak into it.
How about now?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's better.
See, I've got this guy who teaches me about being loud. His name's Bob. And he comes to my meetings and he complains about the fact that I'm never loud enough for him to hear. And I always ask him if he's got his hearing aids on. And he says no. Now, if that's not two alcoholics talking together, that is. I mean, what the hell? So, I am not a spokesman for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to share my experience, strength, and hope. And some of the things may not go with what you've told. In the event that I offend you, please, please don't leave. Please talk to your sponsor. Your sponsor will explain it to you. You know, my sobriety date is February 5th, 1986. And I have been going to Alcoholics Anonymous for half my life. It is by far and away the best thing that has ever happened to me, because it has got me in touch with the Creator, taught me how to share, taught me how to feel, and taught me how to act like a human being. Because before I got here, I was anything but. I was a self-righteous, self-centered son of a bitch. You know, I remember wife number 2 and I were coming home from a meeting one night, and I had just picked up a 6-month shift, and we had walked back from our house in Tullahoma to the church. And I thought, this is it. 6 months sober. And I said, so what do you think of that? And she looked at me and she said, well, I'll tell you what. She said, you were a son of a bitch when you were drinking, and you're a son of a bitch now. And she said, I would really appreciate it if you moved out of the house in the morning. And I said, so this is sobriety. And that's the way it started. See, I understand that there are certain things that I have to go through to be the person that I want to be. I understand that I don't understand. And I have to be willing to take the lesson of pain when it comes to me. So, the first thing I do is I get a new sponsor after she's kicked me out of the house. He takes me through the book, and I learn how to breathe. And what I'm doing is I'm living in a little tiny apartment, and she's living in the big old house. And I know you all don't understand, but I had a resentment. And I mean, it burned and it ate my ass. And so I decided that maybe I should possibly take into consideration working the steps. And I didn't know how. And so I got this guy because he had something that I wanted. I didn't know what it was, but he had a way of talking to people. He had a way of relaxing. He had a way of being honest. He had a way of being open-minded. And I said, what am I going to do with all this God stuff? I said, every time I go to a meeting, they talk about God. I said, I don't like God. I can't stand God. As a matter of fact, I hate God. He said, do you believe in God? I said, hell no. He said, well, why do you have such a resentment for something you don't believe in? Good question. So I told him that I still didn't believe in God, and he said, that's too bad because you're going to die. And I said, can I change my answer? He said, yeah, you can. And so he did the old world time famous old guy thing about go home tonight and kick your shoes off under the bed. And when you go down to get your shoes out in the morning, ask God to keep you sober while you're on your knees. And I thought, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. But you see, the thing is, when you introduce a new concept to me, I consider it stupid. Because I have all the answers. That's how I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous. My life was so beautiful that I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm in this little town in Tennessee. I'm trying to get sober, and it's not working. It really is not working. But I know I can't drink because I drank the hell out of it to the point where I could not even stand to drink anymore. And when they told me in the treatment center that if I drank again I'd die, I believed them. But now that doesn't make sense because just before I went into the treatment center, I was sitting there with a 38 snub nose stuck in my mouth. So I shouldn't be afraid of dying because I'm going to kill myself. You know, this is alcoholism. So he tells me that I have to do a fourth step. And I say, there's no problem with that. He said, and then you and I will do a fifth step. I said, there's a problem with that. Because I don't think I can tell you some of the things I've done. He said, well, why don't you just write the fourth step first and then we'll talk about it. And see, the thing is that what he taught me was anytime that I'm having a problem with the step, I go to the one before it. Because the problem doesn't lie in the step that I'm trying to work. The problem lies in the previous step. And see, it was real difficult for me to turn my will and my life over to the care of God because I was still stuck in step 2. And really, and honestly, I was stuck in step 1 because I wasn't powerless over anything. And then I look at the wreckage of my past and I know better. So anyways, Al and I do a really, really good job of working the steps. And, you know, they tell you when you get out of treatment, no major changes for a year. Well, I got divorced, I moved, I quit my job, and I got in a new relationship. Those are the only changes I made. And so I moved across the state of Tennessee, got myself a place, and you know who showed up? Me. Same problems, same situation, same old behavior, and I continued to go to 12-step meetings, and I continued to pray, and I just really and truly could not get this thing no matter how hard I tried. So I got a new sponsor, and he left me and went back to treatment. I said, wait a minute here, what's going on? And he said, well, there's a place in Havre de Grace, Maryland called Father Martin's. He said they specialize in relapse prevention. And I think you should go because you are relapsing. And I said, hey man, I haven't had anything to drink. He said, relapse ends with the drink, Bill. It doesn't start with the drink, it ends with the thing. And all your behavior tells me that you're relapsing. So, pack the bags, get on the plane, go to Father Martin's. Spend 30 days there. They tell me some more stuff, and I say, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do that. They say, you're going to go to a halfway house. I said, I don't want to go to a halfway house. I don't want to hang out with a bunch of guys. I said, if you take me to a halfway house, I'll be home before you know it. They said, well, we're going to send you to California, to a halfway house. I said, what? They said, because we know you'll be home by the time we drop you off at one in Nashville. So I went to a halfway house and I got an instruction book about that thick on how to live with others. Because there were 19 of us in a little tiny house in San Jose, California. And I learned tolerance, and I learned patience, and I learned everything that I thought I could possibly get before I got the hell out of that place. But, like so many things in my life, it was the best experience of my life up until that point. And I left California, and I came back to Knoxville, and I didn't have anywhere to live, y'all. I'm 35 years old and I don't have anywhere to live. So, go home to mommy and daddy. And I did. Of course, mom and dad were in Pinehurst, North Carolina. And strange times. Came down to this building and picked up a 3-year chip. Met an awful lot of people who really, really and truly helped me. Met a guy by the name of Phil Hewitt. And he and I established a relationship which would continue to grow as we experienced each other as counselors in Pinehurst Treatment Center. I had an office and he had one, and we had an adjoining door. And every time there was a problem, he and I would share. And he and I went to a conference one time, and we were coming back. And we made that big step that some men never make. We decided to trust somebody. We trusted each other, and we developed into a relationship that lasted for 30 years. Phil died last year. Died in an automobile accident. And I had a better understanding of every single emotion that I had ever felt in my life. And I experienced pain like I never have before. I experienced emptiness, and I experienced the hollowness that was in my life that I couldn't get rid of. It's been 1.5 years. I'm still working on it. And you know, a guy called me the other day that I sponsor out in Idaho. And he said, I thought I'd have it all by now. I've been sober 5 years and I should have had this thing figured out by now. I said, yeah. Tried 37 and I'm still trying to figure it out. So, I packed up my toys and I moved to Idaho. Of course, before I did that, I met a lady on a parking lot at the Honda store. No, this is serious. This is very serious. See, I really and truly believe that there is no such thing as coincidence. I truly, truly believe that there is all sorts of divine intervention going on around us all the time. And most of us have spent most of our lives so fucked up we didn't even know it. So I'm sitting there in the Honda store, and I've come back from the halfway house, and I'm trying to sell cars, and I'm trying to make a living. And this lady is walking back and forth down at the end of the lot. And my boss says, one of you two salesmen, go down and talk to that lady right now. So David pulls out a coin and flips it, and he says, heads or tails? I said heads, it was tails. He said, you go, I went. That woman is my wife. Now, if the coin doesn't turn that way, does it happen? I don't know. All I know is that for the last 34 years, she and I have been involved in a very, very lengthy relationship. Not 34 minutes or 34 days, but 34 years. And I could never have done that without practicing these principles in all my affairs. So we're doing this and we're doing that and we're getting along fine and everything like that. And I want to go be a park ranger. And I said, I want to go to Idaho. And Susan says, okay. So I packed up and we'd been out there and we checked it out and everything like that. And I went to Idaho. Before going to Idaho, I was giving Phil his 10-year chip. And y'all really pissed me off. And I got into resentment, another resentment, because I didn't understand how a day-at-a-time program could give out medallions. And so I got pissed off at Phil, I got pissed off at AA, and I walked away. Because you were not doing it the way I thought it should be done. See, the thing that I realize about me, I have one character defect, and that's control. I'm like the guy in the big book. You know, I gotta arrange everything, and I think I know what is best for me. My higher power has proved how wrong that thinking is. So, I walked away from Alcoholics Anonymous for 8 years. And I'm out in Idaho, and I'm doing the ranger thing and everything like that. And I am one miserable son of a bitch. I mean, you know, people ask me, what's it like to not go to a meeting for 8 years? Well, I'm fine, you're an asshole. And I mean, everybody in the world is an asshole. But I'm fine. So this is getting really kind of crazy, and you know, I'm trying to read this stuff that I got from Father Martin's about relapse prevention, and I realize that all the work that I've done up there, I'm relapsing. I'm about to drink, and I can't stop because I'm powerless over alcohol. So I'm in the visitor center one night, and the guy who is our volunteer is talking to the park manager. And he says he'd like to go to Washington State to pick up a 20-year chip. I said, wait a minute. I said, are you in Alcoholics Anonymous? He said, yes. I said, okay. He said, are you? I said, yeah, sort of. He said, you need to go to a meeting. I said, no, I don't need to go to a meeting. I'm fine. I'm perfect. Everything's all right. No, He said, well, you're one of the angriest people I've ever met in my life, and you need to go to a meeting. I said, I don't need to go to a fucking meeting. Get out of my face. And I'm not angry, by the way. He said, I'm going to pick you up at your trailer at 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and we're going to a meeting. I said, man, I don't know what you don't understand about English, but I ain't going to one of those damn meetings. So Roland gets in his Volkswagen and drives over to my trailer the next afternoon about 4:30. And he's got that little Volkswagen Bug with a really, really irritating horn. And so he's sitting outside my trailer. And he won't go away. He will not go away. Now, is this divine intervention? Yes. This saved my life. So finally I go, to hell with it. He's not going to go away. I'll go with him. I'll go to one stupid meeting, and then I'll have him out of my hair. I walk into this all men's meeting in Sandpoint, Idaho, and I feel like I have come home, and I have felt like I had never felt in the longest time. This big old lumberjack gets out of his chair, gives me a bear hug, and says, "Welcome to AA." I said, no, I've been around a long time. I'm not a newcomer. He said, "You sure do look like one." I said, "What does a newcomer look like?" He said, "You." He said, "It's that anger that you got that's plastered on your forehead." I said, "I'm not fucking angry." I said, "Why don't y'all quit calling me that?" Roland and I get to be real good buddies. We're having this conversation about God one day in the back of the park, and he's talking about how God is in the trees and in the water and everything like that. And I'm agreeing with him, and we're just really going on. And he said, "This is the way I meditate." And he takes out his chainsaw and he starts cutting trees down. I said, "Well, you know, each their own." And we really, really get along great. And we're down at the bottom of the park, and we're going to walk back up the hill. He's going to go into the booth to let the natives in, and I'm going to go get some lunch. Roland goes into the booth and dies 7 days after he took me to my first meeting in 8 years. Wow. So then I come back. And you know, guys, I don't know how Creator put so many people in my life to do so many things for me. I'm a member of the Common Cause group in Alcoholics Anonymous in Carthage, North Carolina. There are people there who have carried me through this past few months, who have really helped me. You know, Phil, yeah, he comes and visits. For those of you who did not know Phil, Phil was very, very drawn to the Creator in the form of Native American religion, tradition, whatever you want to call it. And one of the things that happened to Phil was he had cancer, and he was a survivor. And when he thought he was going to die, he was out riding around one day, and he saw a red-tailed hawk land on a fence post right next to his car. He saw that as a sign from his Creator that he was going to be all right, that he was going to overcome his cancer. So, when he gets killed, I have this huge gaping hole that, I mean, you can drive a truck through, no pun intended. And I really and truly don't know what I'm going to do, because he was my sponsor, he was my brother, and he was my best friend. And we've been that way for 30 years. I mean, you know, I was notorious for the 30-minute relationship. What's 30 years? How did Alcoholics Anonymous teach me to do that? So he gets telling me all this lore about the red-tailed hawk and everything, and how it's a good sign, and it's a Creator sign, and so on and so forth. And so he's dead, and I get up the next morning, and I live up in Robbins, and my wife and I have about 7 acres up there, and we have a big tree in the front yard. And the day after he dies, there's a big tree, sits a red-tailed hawk. Red-tailed hawks don't do that. They do not do it. And this red-tailed hawk sat in that tree for 2 days. Just a coincidence? If you all want it to be a coincidence, I choose to be a sign. So, I don't know. I really don't know. It's been a difficult time. It's been a very difficult time. And I really thought that I had done some great work on this. I went away last week to a private retreat, and I was silent for 48 hours, and I guess I'm doing a lot better than I thought I would, because when I was up at the retreat, I was slinging snot and crying like there was no tomorrow. And see, that's the thing I'm talking about when I talk about fear and pain. You know, the other day I went to my doctor, and I was sitting there, and I said, why is my hand shaking like this? And he said, well, it's probably Parkinson's. And I said, wait a minute. No, really, why is my hand shaking like this? He said, well, it's probably Parkinson's. I said, well, what do we do? And he said, we'll have to get you an appointment with a neurologist. And that'll be sometime in October or January. And I said, look, man, you don't understand. I'm an alcoholic. I've got a mind that will magnify things and take me down rabbit holes and run me all over the place. And I cannot wait that long. I just can't. He said, well, that's the way it's going to be. So, there's a creek in the back of my house. And I go down there to meditate. And I was down there one day, and I was talking to God. And I said to God, I said, I really need the name for something, because I've called you the Big Ranger, I've called you all sorts of names, Creator, Higher Power, and everything like that. What do you want me to call you? And there's this voice, and it is a female voice, and she says, Grace. And I said, okay. So, Grace and I have had this relationship for a little over a year, and it's really, really awesome, and it really has changed me. And I'm going through this stuff with everything, the Parkinson's and all that stuff. And I'm on this silent retreat. I'm writing letters to Phil. I'm writing letters to my father, because I had all those I had daddy issues out the ass when I got here. And, you know, I'm writing all these letters and everything like that, and I'm taking them out in the woods, and I'm burning them, doing all the stuff that I've been taught to do to deal with emotional trauma. And I said to Grace, I said, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with things that far away. I can do a day at a time. I have learned through practice that a day at a time is the only way to live. I can do prayer and meditation, but I cannot do something hanging over my head months away. And I said, Grace, what can we do about this? And she said, I got this. Don't worry. And I get back, and the doctor's office calls and says, we'd like to see you Monday morning. Coincidence? No, I don't think so. I don't know whether the diagnosis is right. I don't know whether the diagnosis is wrong. I know that I do know how to live with a disease that can be terminal. But I also know that things aren't working exactly the way they're supposed to. And that's scary. It really and truly is. And I think it's wonderful to have a higher power who understands me, unlike the one that I was taught. Brain's just not working. Best day ever, Hugh. And see, it is. And see, that's the thing that's so phenomenal, because this is my best day ever, because I'm still here. I was invited to come down here. Do you know how many places in my life I was invited to leave? You know, I remember there were places in Nashville where the guys would actually stand at the door and they'd go like this. No, you're not coming in here. And to be given the privilege of coming to see you folks and talk about this stuff. And it's very disconnected, it's very disjointed, but it really and truly makes sense to me. And see, I know it's just like the other day, about, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months ago, Bob and I were sitting there and we were talking. We were at this fine restaurant, Ronnie's Chuck Wagon up in Carthage. And we were trying to make the decision whether we were going to have hot dogs or hamburgers. You know, which cuisine did we want? And Bob looked at me and I looked at him and Bob said, "I'm a miserable son of a bitch." And I said, "You know, so am I." And he said, "What are we going to do about it?" And I said, "Well, when all else fails, find another alcoholic and work with it." And by the grace of God and all good things and everything else, and the grace that I don't understand but I need so desperately, Bob calls Samaritan Colony. Once a month we go over there. And God, I feel better. Because I get out of self. Because this disease of alcoholism is all about me. And there is no recovery about me working on me. See, over the last 37 years, I have sponsored dozens and dozens of people. And you know, every single one of them's been a success. Every single one of the people I have sponsored has been a success. Because I'm still sober. They're drunk, they're dead, they're in recovery, they're somewhere. And you know, all the things that this thing teaches me, you only keep what you have by giving it away. That doesn't make sense. I'm a taker. I want what you have. You don't want what I have. And then I'm going to give it to you and then it's going to be okay. Trust in a higher power that you can't see, feel, or touch, but I don't know about feel. You can feel it. Quite a ride, guys. It really and truly is. You know, many years ago when I was in Tennessee, I went to a men's conference down at one of the state parks and we played golf. That's when I know I'm crazy. When I play golf. See, there's chuckles from people who know what I mean. And we're sitting down there and we've hired this guy to come in. He's on the speaker circuit and everything like that. And he's telling his story and he gets through. And he says, you know, he said, I finally figured it out. And I said, oh boy, I did come down here for the right reason. I am going to find out the answer that I've been looking for all my life. This guy's going to give it to me. And I don't know about you, but I've run to many, many different venues and different people and different religions and everything else, trying to find the answer. What will make me feel good about me? And this guy said something that just blew me away. He said, I know that I don't know. And see, I know that I don't know. And before it was always, I know that I don't know, and I'm going to find out. And see, every single time that I get into that controlling, manipulating son of a bitch, it's I know better than Grace. And Grace knows better than I. And Grace in her gentleness will take me through the times when I know what is good for Bill. Because I don't. I don't know what the future is. I really and truly don't. I do know that I'm looking forward to Monday, day at a time. I'll be very interested to see what the guy says, because there's some things that are just not working right. And I'm going to stop. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Let's give Bill another round of applause. All right, we have no dues or fees, but we do expenses. We're passing the baskets in support of AA Celtic tradition. We offer chips to mark our time in sobriety, and I have asked Maxie to give out chips. Maxie, where you go?
Yeah.
Bill, Max, come on up. Don't make me call a funeral home director.
I'm Maxie, I'm alcoholic. We have a chip system here at the Wilder Building to mark their time in sobriety. Anybody want to pick up a white, give up the fight? I'll leave that one there. 30 days. Hard enough to get it. Why do you leave? Congratulations. Justin. 90 days. 6 months. Anybody expecting? 1 whole damn year. 2 years. All right, who's gonna come up here and finish it off?
Okay.
My name's Hugh and I'm an alcoholic. And a little over 3 years ago, I received an email saying we had a live one and he needed some help. And so I did what you taught me to do. I made a phone call. And I reached out to another drunk. And 3 years later, the man participates actively in Alcoholics Anonymous. He's always willing to put his hand out to the newcomer, talk to people, read with people, and live this thing of sobriety. So congratulations to Mr. Danny.
I try to stay willing. I try to keep an open mind. And I try to, I forgot what I was going to say. I just want to remain reachable and teachable. That's all I want to do.
I've been based for 4 years, 5 years. I'm also proud and privileged to give out a 6-year chip to a great friend of mine. I remember the day he walked through the door, and he hasn't left. Once again, active participant in Alcoholics Anonymous. One of my good friends who play golf a lot, Mr. Chris.
Danny thought that he knows his willingness, open-mindedness, being able to. It took a lot of prayer and a lot of helping others. Trusting God and help others. The main 3 things that I did to stay sober. Thank you.
All right, anybody for 7? 7 through 88? What is it, 88? All right, congratulations on the chips you hold. Thank you, Bill. Great stuff.